like for Sergio to do an introduction of himself, particularly because this is our first time having a male on our summit, which is something new for us and which is something that I think is awesome because men also too deal with mental health in various ways. And Sergio is the perfect person to present for us today. So without further ado, let's welcome Sergio, you guys.
Well, wonderful, wonderful. Hello. I'm sorry. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, everyone. I am so elated to be on this auspicious panel with you all. First off, may I applaud and say kudos to all of the speakers that have gone before me. Ladies, thank you for the information, wisdom that you have shared with us all. You all did in your own respects an immaculate job. So I say thank you to you all. I'm a bit nervous because, hey, I'm the only guy, but I think that when you look at the stereotypical norms of post-modernity and mental health, in other words, when you look at mental health, its condition today and as it pertains to men, we're often overlooked because mental health can be seen as a sign of weakness. It can be seen as demasculating, etc. Right? There are several colloquial stigmas that men particularly have about mental health. And as a male in the mental health field, of course, I want to be an advocate of breaking those stigmas and particularly perpetuating within Black and Brown communities and with people and humanity at large that mental health, especially today, needs to be a top priority for everybody. And as you'll see in my presentation, mental health or the lack of health in our mental stability affects the whole person, not just our thinking and our psychological selves, but it affects and impacts the whole person. So I am going to share my screen and I am going to try and be interesting and all that good stuff and share with you all today what we have prepared. Is that all right? Can everyone see my screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So I've been tasked to talk about men, mental health, trauma, and recovery. Okay. Today, let me move this out of the way. Give me 1 second. Okay. Today we're going to have an introduction, a testimony. What is a man and what is mental health and what is trauma? What does recovery and healing look like? And then we'll have a bit of Q&A. One thing I want to emphasize in my presentation is that this is basic, minimal information, look up definitions and all of that. And I want you all to understand that for everyone who partakes in this, the rabbit hole goes much deeper. But what I'm doing is giving us a basic surface understanding to build autonomy and to build wherewithal as we move forward in our understanding of mental health. Okay. Overview of trauma and how it impacts mental health, the importance of understanding trauma and recovery, providing insights into deeper relationship between trauma, mental health, and discuss pathways to recovery. What we want to understand is how we define a thing determines what we believe about that thing. And so often in our definitions throughout life, when we begin to dive deeper, we understand that the surface definition that we had is not worthy to encompass the full understanding of a thing. And so while I'm going to give basic definitions, through conversation, through question and answers, we'll dive a bit deeper to bring forth more understanding, right? My name is Sergio. I am currently a dual master's student at Loyola University here in Chicago, pursuing a master's of both divinity and counseling. I've been in mental health since I graduated with my bachelor's from Moody Bible Institute in 2018. I got my crisis recovery support specialist certification in 2018. I am a lay pastor with 17 years of ministry experience and 9+ years in leadership. I am an Army veteran, a combat veteran, which means I deployed to a combat area, Iraq specifically. I'm a father of two children. My daughter, Marjani, is 17 now. Amen. And my son, Junior, is 14. I am married to the love of my life, and she is fine as good wine. That sounds so old, don't it? But I'm married to Miss Cynthia Dixon. I'm currently working here in Chicago in community mental health, and I am a suicide survivor. I say this mixture of good and bad because if you look at me and you hear all the goals and things that I've accomplished, being in the military, being a father, being married, having a degree, pursuing all these things, I want to emphasize that mental health cannot be gauged by our eyes. When someone is homeless, you look at them and you see dirt and you see them sitting on the street, and you can make the assumption, hey, this person is homeless. When you see various things, they can be gauged by our visuals. But mental health, a person can smile all day and be on the very verge of a breakdown. So we need to understand that mental health goes way beyond what our eyes can comprehend in the visual aspects. I just want to point that out, right? Let's look at men and let's look at mental health. A man is someone who embraces authenticity, balances strength with vulnerability, and continuously evolves to contribute positively to himself, his family, his community, and the world around him. In postmodernity, or in the world that we live in today, we understand that if you ask 10 different men what the definition of a man is, you will get 10 absolutely different answers, right? So, in generality, and in liberality, I want to define manhood in such a way that it embraces authenticity. In other words, individuality, balances strength and vulnerability. A common colloquial or a common stigma of a man is that of strength, right? But we also have to emphasize that being strong means being vulnerable. Transparency is telling the truth. You can see through me. Vulnerability is the admittance that if I partake, if I say, if I include myself in this, then I have no control of the outcome and I can be hurt. In other words, I'm making myself vulnerable to potential harm, attack, and or degradation. Right. So a man has to know I am strong, but I also have to be vulnerable in order to be strong. Right. A man continuously evolves or adapts. In other words, you can't do 8-track ministry in a DVD generation. You can't do DVD ministry in an iPod generation, and so on and so on. So, as modernity or as time matriculates and changes, a man adapts with the changes of that time. And he continuously contributes positively first himself. I used to be a man who said, it's God, it's family, and then it's me. But then I tried to commit suicide. And after trying to commit suicide, I had a nervous breakdown and I was hospitalized on both at both times, right? So if I have children and a family and a wife that I have to support for or provide for, then I must ensure that I'm responsible for me and maintaining my sanity, progression, and health so that I can positively, progressively provide for that which is in my responsibility, right? So I want to challenge the ideology of putting everything before self because oftentimes we can put some work, school, family, community, responsibilities, etc. And all of these things are important. But a man knows that the first person I must pour into self care is self, right? After self, so may I segue or just put a pin right here? God is absolutely first in everything. God is our sufficiency of supply. And that is a personal opinion that I offer on the public platform, right? God is our sufficiency of supply. And it is the reason that I'm able to sit here and articulate this topic today. But after God, after self, you have family. Family is your number one responsibility. Family is also your number one support system. After self, after God, self, family, then we have the community in which I'm based in, and then we have the world which I involve myself in, right? Now I want to go into what is mental health. It refers to the state of our emotional, psychological, social, physical, and spiritual well being. It influences how we think, feel, behave in our daily life. Good mental health allows us to cope with stress, build and maintain relationships, work productively, and make meaningful contributions to both our families, ourselves, our communities, and the world at large. It is not the absence of mental illness. but is the presence of positive characteristics and strategies to better recover from mental illness, trauma, or the effects thereof, i.e., self esteem, emotional regulation, medication compliance, etc. Understand, good mental health is not the absence of trauma, trigger, or mental illness. Good mental health is the ability to react progressively and positively in the presence of trauma, trigger, and mental illness. At the age, I think I was about 25 or 26, the military diagnosed me with PTSD. PTSD is post traumatic stress syndrome, right? And the first response I gave everybody, I ain't going to the doctor, I ain't going to the hospital, and I ain't taking no medicine. Have you ever been there before? Have you ever heard something so traumatic in and of itself you would not agree with it? You didn't want to hear about it. I'll overcome it with my own knowledge and strategy and all that good stuff, right? That was my young, immature, manly answer. Have you ever been there, sisters or brothers? A place in your life where I got it, I'm straight, I'll be good. So here's what happened. One day I went into a term we have in the military called shell shock, and I blanked out. And at the time, I picked up my 6 or 7 year old daughter by her neck and I threw her across the room. And when I came to, she was crying profusely. And I'm like, what happened? Right. And so often when it comes to mental health, what we do is we don't get help until a tragedy happens. And we as professionals want to change and reverse that dynamic. Get help first. That way you prevent the tragedy from happening later, right? Particularly in my community, in my growing up, some of the colloquials and some of the stigmas that we face are that you're crazy if you go talk to somebody or you're weak, etc. Right? We as professionals, you now having this information have a responsibility to be a conduit of help. How do you help? Sure, you tell somebody else to go get help, whether it be psychiatrist, counselor, therapist, pastor, etc. Go get some type of help. That way we can start being pro. So police are reactive. They react when something happens. Security is proactive in that they prevent something happening, right? We want to do both. When something happens, hey, let's go get you some help. But if we begin to inform people before the tragedy or the bad situation happens, we can begin to lessen its impact and give tools not only to our family but to our communities and to the world. 5 spears mental health effect. I don't know if it's affect or effect, but whichever one is right, that's the one we're going with. So, emotional, a person's ability to recognize, understand, and manage their emotions encompasses feelings such as happiness, sadness, anger, fear, and love, significantly influences how individuals react to situations and interact with others. In other words, mental health on a good note means deregulation. Regulation. Regulation infers, in a clinical sense, a person's ability to balance their emotions, reality, and right decision making. Right. So when a person is regulated, when stress comes, they know how to balance. I may feel a certain type of way, but I still have to react a certain type of way. Right. But when a person does not have good regulation ability or they're deregulated, they cannot balance emotions and productive reactions. Right. So they lie on their emotions. And usually when something happens, death, mental illness, diagnosis, etc., we become overly sad or overly mad, and we cannot control ourselves in that state, right? Next is psychological. It relates to the cognitive and mental processes that govern a person's thoughts, perceptions, and behaviors. It includes personality traits and how individuals process information and make decisions. Now, can we pause here for the cause? Let's talk about a word called pride. When I was diagnosed with PTSD, because I operated in the stigma of mental health, is and getting help is a sign of weakness, I immediately disagreed with it, right? And what happened? Tragedy ended up happening, right? But here's the thing: pride steps in and causes you to rebuttal, causes you to combat, causes you to defend when maybe you need to research, redefine, and revisualize what you know, believe, and or think about mental health, right? So the psychological is so important. And a lot of people don't differentiate the difference between emotional and psychological, right? Emotional is how you feel. Psychological is really dealing with how you act, right? Behaviors, your personality traits, narcissism. These new nuanced words that we have. Narcissism. A narcissist first, as I learned from my wonderful wife, the first person a narcissist manipulates is themselves, right? And we won't get off on that because that'll be left field. But what I'm saying is when the spirit of pride comes about, right? It affects our psychological in a negative way, in that it inhibits our behaviors and our right reactions. So, mental health, this psychological piece really has to be dealt with. Further along, we move into social. The social sphere involves the relationships and interactions of individuals an individual has with others, includes social skills, communication, and the ability to build and maintain meaningful connections within various social contexts: family, friends, work, community, etc. Right? Um, a good aspect of mental health in the social field is you're able to draw boundaries. My God, somebody ought to give an offering right there. Listen, boundaries, and there's a difference between boundaries and barriers. And a lot of people don't know this, right? Barriers in the military were used to prevent and to evade attack. So, in other words, they would stagnate barriers to prevent the enemy from infiltrating, right? But boundaries set up perimeters and areas of operations, right? Um, Barriers prevent, they stop, they inhibit, right? While boundaries present positive limitations and areas of operation. In other words, when I go to work, my professional relationships are not personal. So a boundary between professional and personal is there are lines that should not be crossed. Sergio is a people person. I like talking. I like mixing. I'm a military guy. I like to build camaraderie. I like everybody to be comfortable and productive. Because if I got to be here for 8 hours a day, 40 hours a week, I want to work in an environment that's conducive of peace and joy and happiness. But at the same time, and at the end of the day, I need my check. Praise the Lord. So, presenting those boundaries within a workplace differentiate how relationships should operate. So, when your mental health is good, you set up good boundaries and you lessen some of those barriers, but you know where they should be put, right? But in a social context, when your mental health is not so great, you cross lines, you don't set barriers, and you make yourself the target. They say something in the corporate world: Q-tip. Quit taking it personal. When your social mental health is not so good, things somebody do to you is personal. And I can testify because I used to operate like that. And sometimes I have to dial back and digress and say, let me get pride out the way and realize that everybody ain't personally against or personally with. Again, this is regulation. They ain't against and they ain't with. So, okay, let me keep going if I get to preaching. Physical pertains to the physical body and its overall health and function. It includes aspects such as fitness, nutrition, sleep, and the body's ability to perform daily activities and recover from injury or illness. When your mental health is good, you want to work out. You want to be healthy. Losing weight is, there are plenty of get quick, of get slim quick schemes, and some of them do work. But what I found in my own journey is you can start them and they work, but as soon as you stop them, that weight comes back. Therefore, losing weight is not a quick fix. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of health. And when my mind is healthy, I want my body to follow my mind. So I want the whole person to be healthy, right? But when my mind is off, food can be a coping mechanism. When my mind is off, I can deal with sleep deprivation, right? And so, what I'm really trying to point out in defining these five spheres of the person is to show us that mental health is so important and how it affects everything encompassing the individual, particularly men, because men are leaders. Hello, somebody. So after the physical, we look at the spiritual. The spiritual relates to a person's sense of purpose, meaning, and connection to a higher power greater than themselves. It can involve religious belief, personal values, ethics, and a sense of inner peace and harmony. There's a study I was just doing on the term psychopath, right? And spiritually, there are a plethora of religions and a plethora of spiritual beliefs, right? For me, I am a Christian. I believe in the Trinity, and I know you're not supposed to close that, but hey, I'm the professional presenting right here, right? With that, I can testify or I can give testament to that God has been a keeper for me, right? And we're all taught you don't buy clothes from a naked man, right? And I present that because I found that my faith has kept me when my mind failed me. Let me say that again. My faith has kept me when my mind has failed me, right? And even in those times, now this is where the higher power comes into play because my faith is mine, right? But when my mind left, the power in which that I believe was still there. So when we look at the five spheres of the person and how mental health affects it, you can see it. Hopefully, I painted the picture that when your mental health is off, essentially your entire person, your entire being, life, however you want to dissect it, is impacted by your mental health. This I hope we can all agree upon. So, in both the masculine and the feminine role, the masculine being the leader, and when I say leader, I'm not putting men above women by any means, right? What I'm saying is men lead families, men lead villages. In other words, they are the backbone, they are the providers. They are not saying women can't provide, not saying women don't help, and all that good stuff. So, this is not a conversation of masculine, feminine, all that, right? What I'm saying is men have a role of fatherhood. We plant the seed, the woman brings about the seed. So, with men, if I may be a bit biased, we sometimes have to put that much more energy into our mental health, into making sure that we're able to fulfill that which is our innate responsibilities. What is trauma? Trauma is an emotional response to a distressing event that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope. Types of trauma: acute trauma, resulting from a single incident, usually short term, happens right away, hits you in the face. Chronic trauma, repeated and or prolonged events, i.e. domestic violence, abuse, and neglect. Complex trauma, exposure to multiple traumatic events, often of an invasive and interpersonal nature. The pictures that you see are various types of trauma, right? And acute trauma does not mean the impact of that trauma is lesser than that of complex trauma. And what we find in postmodernity in today's society is that most individuals, particularly from various cultural contexts, the greatest trauma that they are introduced to is complex trauma. In other words, multiple types of trauma that affect an individual as they matriculate through life. What's important about trauma? We all experience it. I'll use myself as a case study. The military, because we have to be medically reviewed upon entering and exiting, the military diagnosed me with PTSD. But if you look at my history, I had PTSD well before the military. The military just recognized it. As a child, my mother was shot and killed a month and 8 days after I was born. My father was in and out of jail, therefore, in and out of my life. Various people within my household were drug addicts, right? I was beat, I was molested. All of that is trauma, right? And then I had the act out phase, if I may, my reaction to my trauma. And as a young person, as a young man, I was extremely promiscuous. And if I would define that promiscuous language myself, caught up in perversion, caught up in the wrong thinking, the wrong mindset, making decisions that only broke me more as opposed to improve my well-being, right? And so when we look at this type of complex trauma, of course, mental illness is going to be developed as a result of the traumas that we face, right? But if you look at me now, the testimony is that not only was it was introduced, but it didn't kill me, neither did it keep me. Key point. It didn't kill me, neither did it keep me. That's why I'm sitting here teaching and informing us about mental health, because I can testify, hey, I've been there. And who better to encourage someone else than a person that's experienced it themselves? So now we pause to ask the question, what is your healing going to do to impact your world? Everybody ain't going to be no therapist, counselor, pastor, none of those things. But in whatever sphere of influence that you're in, how can your healing impact and enlarge that sphere of influence? Because everybody at some point or another is going to deal with trauma. Let's think about it. The impact of trauma, as I think we've kind of went through this, it affects your psychological self, it affects your physical self, it affects your emotional, social, and spiritual self. Psychological, it introduces mental disorders, anxiety disorders, depression, substance use disorders. Among men at large, some of the greatest impacts in 2024 statistics say the top psychological impacts of trauma and mental health disorders is bipolarism and schizophrenia. Physical effects, chronic pain, sleep disturbances, emotional instability, isolation, increased stress levels, social. You don't perform well at work, in relationships. You're not maintaining your responsibility with your family. Focus is low, productivity is low. Spiritually, you become prone to suicide. You become prone to homicidal ideations, guilt, shame, condemnation, etc. When you don't invest in the wellness of your mental health, you become susceptible to the very things that you're looking at. And I don't want to be over impactful or inducive of emotions while teaching this, but I have to allude to it because when I look back over my life, most of this I've seen before. And when we look back over our life, whether it be all or whether it be one or two, we can identify at some place. I know somebody who dealt with that. I dealt with that. Matter of fact, I know 7 people that dealt with that. And so it hopefully encourages us to understand the importance and the value of of our mental health and seeking help when and where it is needed. Recovery, the time for it is now. You don't got time to wait till tomorrow, because what if tomorrow never comes? It won't get any easier to get clean than it is right now. The longer you wait, the harder it becomes. If you think of the principle or the concept of a seed, you plant it in dirt, right? It takes root and then grows, right? One of the most powerful metaphors of planting and seeds that I know is that of the palm tree. What the palm tree does is it's planted and it first grows down into the ground. And it does not stop growing down until its roots find a rock to wrap around. And once the roots are girded, are planted, are solid, are founded upon that rock, then the palm tree begins to grow up. Palm trees grow very tall. And palm trees do this because when the wind comes, when the storm comes, right? The tree will blow, it'll bend, but it will not break because it's rooted on the rock, right? If we take this metaphor and bring it into the mental health spectrum, then what's going on is dirt is the trauma and the bad stuff and the experiences that impact us negatively that we go through. Everybody goes through some form of dirt, right? The roots are the will that we have to get help, to recover, to heal, right? The rock is the opportunities, the counselors, the therapists, the platforms like this, Miss Lakia Lee, who present this information. Now it becomes a rock. So we know, hey, I got to get help. And the resource to go get it, right? And then when you grow up, you learn you're stronger than what you ever thought you were. And every experience, every trauma becomes a point of reference. So if I made it over this hump, I'll make it over the next hump. And even when the trigger comes and reminds me of what I can't, where I've been or what happened, I know I've made it over before, so I can simply make it over again. What is recovery? Recovery is a deeply personal, ongoing process through which individuals work toward achieving a meaningful and satisfying life despite trauma, mental illness, and or mental health challenges. Recovery involves the deployment of resilience, optimism, self awareness, correct definitions, understanding, knowing where help is, and the ability to manage effectively. When it comes, sometimes I'm not enough by myself to handle this, so I need to reach out to some form of help. Recovery is not merely about the absence of symptoms, because you can have the absence of the symptom, but still deal with the thought of the hurt or the pain. The amygdala is the part of the brain that stores memories, right? And when that memory pops up, while I may not have a physical symptom, that memory is still there. Thus, my mind and my heart are affected. So recovery is not merely about the absence of symptoms, but encompassing a holistic, including every sphere of the person, a holistic approach to improving overall y'all know what I'm trying to say, well-being, including emotional, psychological, and social dimensions. Individual process emphasizes the importance of personal goals and preference, allowing people to define their treatment and recovery process. This is what we call a person centered approach. You should never go to a professional and this is what's wrong, this is what you should do. Uh, what? My name is Sergio Divine Robert Dixon Garcia. So, in other words, because I come from a culture and a community, and I have a set of beliefs and a set of values and principles and ethics and morals, I am an individual. And so, when you treat me in my recovery process, we must work together to find out what is the best way to overcome where I am. That's the person centered approach. As we've matriculated through time and through science and medicine and all those things in therapy, we found that old school ways or old modalities are I'm the professional. I know what I'm talking about. Here's a diagnosis. This is what you should do. But now there has to be an integration of the recovery process. I need as much input because the person that's the professional on me in my life is me. So you may give me a vantage point that's outside of my emotions and experience and stuff, right? But in the treatment process, we need to collaborate. And that's one thing that really deters various communities from getting help is the do this that way approach. And that's not correct. Person centered is the way. Beyond symptom management, traditional views of mental health often focus on symptom reduction or elimination. Recovery shifts the focus to improving the quality of life, fostering personal growth, and developing coping skills even when symptoms persist or triggers happen. I want to go immediately into SMART goals. SMART goals are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. Specific, they should be clear and concise. Measurable, track, measure the goals that you're trying to achieve, right? They should be achievable, right? If I'm trying to lose weight, I know tomorrow or by the end of next Friday, 50 pounds is not a realistic goal, right? Because I'll probably been overwork myself, hurt myself, starve myself, etc., right? But if I say, let's lose 5 pounds a week for the next 3 months, I think that's a measurable, specific, and achievable goal, right? Relevant. If I'm trying to lose weight, then my focus should be on watching less TV. Even though, yeah, that's not a good example because sometimes watching less TV can help you lose weight because you can use that time to work out. But you understand what I'm saying. The goals should be relevant to the issue at hand and they should be time bound. You should have a clear and concise time frame and deadline. Sometimes you got to give your suffering the expiration date. I don't mean to preach, but I'm just saying. Sometimes people hold on to their suffering because it becomes a crutch. My professor said something to me, blew my mind, slapped me upside the head too. He said, people who have been through chronic trauma, introduced to various and multiple and a lot of traumas, they use their trauma as an excuse to excuse their behaviors. In other words, I'm narcissistic because I had a whole lot of trauma. In other words, I'm mean as hell because I had a whole lot of trauma. In other words, I people please because I've been through so much hurt and trauma in my own life. No, at some point you got to heal. At some point you got to give yourself an expiration date to your problem so that you can grow and become the that somebody ought to gave an offering right there. You ought to give your stuff an expiration date so you can become the best version of you possible. And then you can really impact and change the world and family and community around you. There we go. Any questions? Uh, we have anybody. I don't need, how do you do this? Okay, so we're at questions. I want to see our little things. So unmute or type them in the chat or somebody just blurt them out
I
if you
don't
have
have
any
a
questions.
question. I just really have feedback. It's just it kind of ebbs and flows how the things that you guys discussed from the top of the morning to the end of the day all kind of corresponded with each other on how to deal with specific things. Especially how Lisa started us off with the mental and how that is vital in mental health, and then going into the grief, and then how the grief going into the mindfulness, and then kind of Kiana, you and Sergio kind of touched on some very same or similar things. Um, and one thing that I thought that I'm hearing throughout the whole presentation with everyone is it's okay to um, say no. And that's something that I'm practicing as well. So when you guys were saying that, that's why I was nodding my head, because I'm learning to, I want to make everybody happy, people pleaser, that type of thing. I want to make sure that no one's upset. And when you said you had the phone list, that was just real funny to me, because the phone does work both ways. And I've gotten into the habit of putting my phone on do not disturb, because I'm completed, and when I get done with work, I'm at my second job, which is being a mom. So rather than me trying to just pour into everybody and making sure everybody else is okay, me learning to turn the phone off. If it's an emergency, I'll know it by looking at it, and then I'll respond accordingly. Knowing that still too, when I'm involved in different projects and things of that nature, learning to know when to cut that off. I'm only working on this for 2 hours, and then I'm done for the day. I'm going on to my next thing because I have other important things on in my life. So I really appreciate that, and I took that away from you guys. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to give that feedback, because Sergio, you also touched on it as well as Kiana. Does anyone else have any questions for Sergio?
I don't have a question as well, but I do have a comment. And like I said from the very beginning, I thought you had a preacher voice, Mr. Sergio. And yes, I almost at one point I was typing, I'm like, yeah, this one you right here. But excellent, excellent. I just definitely love how you really did bring everything home, and that's Lakia was saying. I feel like everything definitely kept building off of each other and gave everyone a well-rounded understanding of what mental health is and how best to take care of it. So I'm very, very grateful for being here. Again, just reconfirming of why I do what I do, why we do what we do, because like Sergio said, again, who's best to help you through it but besides somebody who's been through it. So I definitely thank you guys for that. This was amazing.
So anyone else have any questions for Sergio? Sergio, do you have any final words before you let everyone know your social media platforms and how to get connected with you?
I just want to say everyone did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for the information and expertise that you've let out. And what I want to say to the panel and the professionals is this: you are so needed. Burnout is real in our field. Transference is real in our field. When you're helping with people, it's some knuckleheads out here, and it seems like the systems are not set up for success, particularly our success. But I want to say, be encouraged. And I want to say that, um, if I'm to say it in my own language, um, God is not a respecter of persons, and my witness is in heaven, and my record is on high. Your good will never not be returned unto you from the Lord. So be encouraged and know that people need what we have to offer. So thank you all so much for sharing alongside of myself. Miss Lee, thank you for what you're birthing here. Thank you for the seeds that you're sowing here. Go forth and knowing that every challenge, every hiccup, every stumbling block, and every pothole, it's ordained, it's set in place to perfect that which is going to change a nation, which is going to influence culture for the better. So thank you for your time, your talent, your treasure, and your sacrifice to help the various communities that you will impact. Thank you all, and that's it.
Thank you so much for that, Sergio. Put up your social media handles so people can know how to get connected to you.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna leave that there for a minute so Sergio can let you guys get his social media platforms, and